fighting dependency on government so Arkansas can be the land of opportunity once again. Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us here at the Marble Palace. The phone number, if you would like to text me today, is 870-275-9799. Let's see here. We just have one text message here coming in on the fuel tax. If this also applies to diesel, fuel isn't it if it applies to diesel fuel, isn't it counterproductive to raise money for road repairs by taxing something that is going to increase the cost of said repairs by at least 20%? I work in the highway construction industry, and fuel is a very large part of road work cost. Roy from Clay County. Now, I didn't thought of that. So when you go to construct the roads, and that's interesting. And matter of fact, you could actually take this in reverse logic. Yeah, are you on, Paul? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't turn it on. Yeah, the highway fuel would be an issue. I don't know that it would apply to off-road vehicles like dozers and.
Well, I guess the point is gas prices. My point is, gas prices have plummeted. So shouldn't that mean that road construction is cheaper?
I would think so.
Yeah, but they're not saying this. They're not telling us that.
Yeah,
that's pretty ridiculous.
Well, if I understand it correctly, in this legislation, it would be the higher of two different formulas, and so they're not actually going to make it. Well, if gas prices go way down, you're going to get a cut in taxes. It's going to be the higher of these two formulas. So if gas prices go up, you get nailed. If gas prices go down, well, you're still going to get nailed.
Yeah. It's the whole thing is ridiculous. Anyway, we had a great first hour covering the gas tax, and so you should certainly check that out. All right, so Paul, I wanted to talk a little bit about. We had Charlie Collins' revised gun bill come up in the House today. I didn't get to see it because I've been preoccupied. So it did pass out of the House.
It did. And so the new revised version is pretty substantially different from the first version.
Yes, that's an understatement.
Right. The first version was pretty insignificant. It would basically allow staff and professors to carry on campus under certain circumstances, and it was relatively regulated. This new version expanded it rather drastically to other areas, such as the state capitol itself, so that people could carry here, and also college campuses and maybe a few other government buildings. But on top of that, it added more training and more stipulations for this enhanced access, if you will. And so I was a little bit torn about this newer version of it, and because I think it kind of furthers the idea of basically having to purchase your rights.
Yeah, it's like a expansion. It's a new concealed carry license. It's so frustrating.
It's like an endorsement on your concealed carry license.
Yeah, you got to get a pistol instructor or something to endorse you, and then you got to take the extra training.
Right.
And I got to tell you, I know everyone's running around. I know Senator Trent Garner and Charlie Collins. I know they're running around shaking each other's hands and stuff. But to me, this is a. I mean, could more people now carry?
Yes.
Will there be more people with guns? I don't think so. Well, I really don't.
There'll be more people carrying on college campuses and here at the Capitol as well. Because I think people will go ahead and get that enhancement, if you will.
Just more of a restriction of our rights.
Well, I almost say it actually is more of a restriction, but it further.
Come on. How is it not more of? How is it not? Because you're now increasing. You're creating obstacles to exercise the right to protect yourself.
Well, the reason why I won't say it's an increase of restrictions is because right now we can't carry at the Capitol and we can't carry in colleges.
Okay.
And so this doesn't actually restrict that in any way. What it does is it gives us the ability to do so if we turn over some of our rights.
I feel like we're making a karate system out of our gun laws. It's like, okay, I've got the white belt, and now I go through a little bit more, and now I get the brown belt.
Right. And I think that's probably a good analogy, is that the government took away our rights to carry, and then they sold a little bit of them back to us as privileges.
Taxes, yeah.
Well, in the form of tax, in the form of a fee, and also jumping through hoops. And so one of the things you have to do is you have to basically be treated like a felon by giving your fingerprints to the government and do a criminal background check on you.
Yep. And they sell it to you by saying in my concealed carry class, they sold it back to me and say, this is actually good. If you ever get pulled over, you go ahead and you hand them your driver's license and you hand them the concealed carry license, and they know that you're not a drug addict and you've passed these background checks and you're going to get treated differently by the cops. I mean, that's what some of them say.
Well, and that might be true, and so but
that's insulting if you think about the Bill of Rights.
It is kind of, and so in other words, are they telling you that you'll be treated more like a regular citizen, like you're entitled to be treated
with respect.
You'll be treated with dignity and respect, like you should be treated anyway. If you go ahead and purchase this privilege from the state, telling the government that you're now a super citizen, because you have been given a small portion of your rights back to you. That aren't actually rights. Your rights have been taken, but then given back to you in the form of a privilege. If you jump through the right hoops and pay a fee.
That's exactly right. Okay, so it passes. Let me ask you this, because I covered this a lot last week, and I know we didn't get to talk. How come the NRA went from not supporting extra barriers
to supporting
it? And was it all ASA? I think it had everything to do with ASA and the leadership.
Well, having talked to the NRA guy here, Anthony Roulette,
best name in the business.
I think the difference for them was that the restrictions were relatively insignificant in their minds.
But they weren't a week earlier, right? They were 16 hours instead of 8. Yeah,
but the restrictions from that were previously on the bill were quite a bit more substantial than what they are now. The restrictions now, the added restrictions, are not that substantial. They're pretty insignificant, especially compared to what they were on that initial severe amendment that came through on the floor of the Senate. And I think that was by Jeremy Hutchinson, and it was going to require, I think, 16 hours of extra training, and also a minimum of 25 years old. And maybe even still some pretty severe.
Yeah, at least it's 21. I mean, we can say positives, but again, they're delegating our rights back to us. And I blamed it on ASA. I had a Facebook post or a comment on, I think maybe it was a thread that you were on about, thank goodness for, all nephews aside, thank goodness for ASA for, delegating our rights back to us. I mean, that's what this is. And, I go back and I watch his campaign videos because we did this yesterday. I think they might have just played over at paulharrell.com.
Okay.
Where, he talked about Obamacare. He talked about he could get spending under control. He talked about school choice. And he talked about the Second Amendment. And he basically said, what's written there, it is what's written. And I'm thinking, wow, what a change from we've got to have, because of universities and presidents calling me, now we've got to
have some restrictions.
Delegate the rights.
You got to remember, though, Asa Hutchinson is an attorney. And attorneys believe that the Supreme Court is what makes things constitutional or unconstitutional, in large part.
That's a big problem.
When you say unconstitutional, a lot of times I think what they hear in their minds is the Supreme Court ruled against it, as opposed to when those of us who actually know how to read, because we haven't been through law school and learned how to not read, when we think of unconstitutional, it's like, well, the Constitution says you can't do it, or it's not delineated in the Constitution, which
enumerated,
right, enumerated, and so those of us who have not been trained to not be able to think through law school, we look at it and say, well, unconstitutional means we can actually look at the Constitution and we can point out this is why it's unconstitutional, as opposed to a lot of attorneys will say, well, this is unconstitutional because the court said it was, and the court may have a really, really bad reason for believing it's unconstitutional.
Yeah. Anyway, well, so this bill is, I'm sure, fast going to become law now.
I think it'll probably pass,
and because the governor's happy with it, and that's all that matters these days. We had a school choice bill that got pulled back into committee and amended with what the governor wants, and now that repassed out of committee.
I talked to Dotson about that a little bit this morning. HB 10 or 1222, and at
this point we're just trying to get whatever we can get.
Unfortunately, I think that's part of the problem, is that we're acting like Democrats in the South in Reconstruction. We're just trying to get whatever little scrap of welfare we can get from the Yankees as masters, and we've got 75 Republicans in the House of Representatives.
I know, this is all we can do.
Seriously,
this is the best we have. Is all is King Asa, trying to control things.
Well, and I don't just blame Asa Hutchinson. 75 Republicans can easily override his veto.
Oh, I know. Well,
so,
why won't they?
I blame these guys for being a bunch of wimps.
Yeah.
I mean, they need to get their act together and actually have have some principles. Get a spine.
I know. And it's going to get worse with Trent Garner's bill to do away with GIF funding, which I support, but he's going to give it to the governor. It's going to get so much worse because now he's going to dictate who, if you play ball, your district gets money. If you don't, we're going to cut you off. I mean, it's literally, I think giving the governor control of the GIF money is going to it could produce like a Hunger Games result where the 13th district, or I don't know, what are there, 12 districts, those are the worst districts because they get the least amount of resources and because, but whoever's closest to the power structure is going to be taken care of. And I think that's where we're headed.
There may be something to that. I don't know. And I despise the idea.
I mean, not literally the Hunger Games, but you know what I mean.
Right, I understand. And so I despise the idea of the governor having the ability to buy
loyalty
to
fealty,
and sometimes it's just it may be that the governor's going to bribe companies to come in. Bribe's an interesting word, but to bribe companies to come in and set up shop in some particular area, and I don't know that I'd say that he would try to deliberately direct those companies toward one district or another.
You're thinking, wow, Paul, you're really thinking that like that.
However, I just don't like the governor to have that kind of power anyway, because I don't think that's his role to try to manipulate economic.
I come to this district because this guy plays ball. I want him to get the photo up. I don't want Josh Miller to get the credit. I don't want it to go to his district. Yeah, that's really good.
I'd hope that he wouldn't do that sort of thing, but I'd rather he not actually try to manipulate the economy anyway.
All right, we're talking with Paul Calvert, and I want to get one more bill in here because these are kind of obscure. This is an obscure one that I haven't spent any time on, but I know you have. It's intriguing to me. Has to do with grandparent rights.
Right. Correct.
Okay, do you know what the bill number is off the top of your head?
It's 1773.
Wow.
HB 1773.
I thought you were going to say 1776 for a second.
It's HB 1773.
Okay.
It's by Lori Rushing. And so this bill is, as I understand it, it would basically, it would affect situations where, for instance, let's say you have 3 kids, and your parents or your wife's parents are accustomed to being around their grandkids. They see them a couple times a month or whatever.
Yeah.
And let's say for some reason one of these grandparents they go off into doing something that you disapprove of. It's something that you don't want your children to be around. Maybe they have a drinking problem, or maybe it's something that's not even like that. Maybe it's just a religious issue that you have.
Yeah.
You don't want your children to be exposed to this. Maybe their sexual preferences change. I don't know.
Yeah, something happens.
Something happens that you as a parent decide. I don't want my children to be around this, to be influenced in this way
by the grandparents.
By the grandparents, right? And so you as a parent, I believe, should have every right to make that decision on your own, without any kind of scrutiny from the government.
But Lori Rushing thinks otherwise.
It seems that way, and so the
you're so nice.
And so the I try to be, but and so what this bill seems to be doing is that it would give the grandparents standing to sue you for visitation rights. And as I understand the bill, the grandparents do not have to actually. The burden of proof is not on the grandparents. The burden of proof is now on the parents to prove why it's justifiable,
why they cut the relationship off.
Right, they have to prove to the court. And so I think it could have a couple different effects. Is one, well, what if your grandparent was having or what if your parent or your wife's parents, maybe they had an alcohol problem. You didn't really want to expose that publicly.
Yeah.
And so you're like, out of honor for your own parents, you're like,
why is Lori Rushing wanting to do this? There's got to be a problem there.
I think she had a personal issue with this.
I know she had a personal tragedy, and her daughter passed away.
Right, and so I don't know at all. I don't even know that this would actually apply to her at this point, because I think her son-in-law has actually moved out of state, and so. But I don't know enough about that issue. Okay. So I think there could be some motivation there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, though, unless there's criminal involvement, I think parents need to be assumed to have the ultimate right to make that decision.
I completely agree with you.
Without the government stepping in and second guessing them, because it's
saying, if prove that these kids don't need to be around their grandparents.
Right, because at the end of the day, it might be an issue like maybe a grandparent goes off into homosexuality or something like that, and you disapprove of that as a parent. But the court says, you know what, homosexuality is just fine. Your kids need to see it.
When you say it like that, my first reaction is, Paul, that's kind of extreme. But with the way the LGBT community is,
right.
oh my goodness! Can you imagine having to go to a court nowadays and say this is my objection if their lifestyle's contradictory to my moral teaching?
And if you're having to actually go up against a judge that's kind of left wing, leaning, and so I think the odds of you losing that case might be pretty good.
Yeah,
and so I think it could be a problem. And to me, I'm like, I don't think I'd ever be in a situation like that. However, there are some people out there that could get into situations like that. Some older people.
What a strange bill. So this bill passed or failed?
It passed out of the House already.
How much? Or I mean, barely. Or
I don't know what the margins were.
How would they do this? Why would they not think just a little bit?
I don't know that they
just a little bit.
Why
would you want to prioritize grandparents over parents?
I don't know that they realized what was going on. I actually had a Facebook post about it, and David Meeks chimed in. He thought it was one thing. I encouraged, and he looked at it again. He's like, "Oh boy, we shouldn't have passed that.
We should not have passed that."
Yeah, he actually said that right on my wall.
Was it a bunch of emotional arguments on the floor?
Well, I think he said that they passed another bill, or Lori Rushing ran another bill just before that, and it was they spent a lot of time on that one, I think, and then this one came up.
They just kind of got tired of it.
Well, and maybe it wasn't presented accurately enough, or whatever.
That happens
whatever the case may be, but. David Meeks was under the impression that it did something different, and when he saw it after I pointed it out, he was like, "We shouldn't have passed this."
Okay, well, hopefully it'll die in the Senate.
I'm
but
hoping.
Who knows?
I'm hoping it's in the Senate Judiciary right now, and but if your listeners want to go to my Facebook page and Paul Calvert, I've actually got the numbers and email addresses of those
breakdown
of those the senators on that committee. There's only 8 of them. You can call each one of them.
Paul, do you have children?
I do not.
Oh, you don't?
I'm not married either.
No, hang on. I was going to say this is interesting because if you did have children and you're, I'd ask you, man, you must have some rough in-laws.
No, that's
this
the
bill
thing
has to be stopped.
I
Stop this bill immediately.
I can't imagine my own mother. My father died a few months ago, but I can't imagine my